My parents forced me to get married to my best friend. My best friend Daxton had been my best friend since we'd been 5 years old. Our families had lived next door to each other in a small town in West Virginia. We'd never been romantic. We'd been like siblings. He'd known I was gay. I'd come out to him at 14. He'd told me at 16. We'd been each other's safe person. The thing about our town is that it had been the kind of town where being gay was still considered a problem. Our families were deeply religious. Daxton's father was a pastor. My father was an elder at the same church. Then, in our senior year of high school, my parents had started pushing me about my future. They'd been telling me I needed to find a good Christian husband. They'd been threatening not to pay for my college unless I made progress. Daxton's parents had been doing the same thing to him. Then on a Wednesday in December, our two sets of parents had sat us down together at my house. They'd told us they'd come up with a wonderful idea. They wanted Daxton and me to get married right after graduation, before college. Daxton and I had stared at each other across the table. Our parents had been so excited. The church had been booked. The dress had been picked out. Daxton's mother had told us this was God's plan. Daxton and I had gone to my room afterward to process the surprise. We'd closed the door. We'd both started laughing. Then we'd both started crying. If we'd refused, our parents would have been suspicious. We were both gay. We were both still living at home. We weren't ready to come out. We'd come to a decision. We were going to do it. We were going to use the situation to our advantage. We'd gotten married in a small church ceremony in June. We'd kissed at the altar. We'd performed perfectly. Our parents had been weeping with joy. We'd received $12,000 in wedding gifts. That money had been the beginning of our escape fund. We'd both gotten into the same college 8 hours away. We'd moved into married student housing. We'd been the most normal-looking couple to outsiders. We'd both been quietly dating other people on the side. Our parents had visited twice a year. We'd performed for them. In our senior year of college, Daxton had met someone. His name was Sebastian. They'd fallen in love. I'd met someone too. Her name was Maricela. We told our parents 2 weeks before graduation. We'd done it together in a coffee shop, so they couldn't make a scene. They'd cried. They'd yelled. They'd told us we were going to hell. Daxton's father had had a heart attack on the spot. He'd survived. But the next 6 months had been the worst of our lives. Our parents had cut us off. We'd been disowned. Our marriage had finalized as a divorce 8 months later. Daxton had moved to Portland with Sebastian. I'd moved to Boston with Maricela. We'd stayed best friends. The thing nobody knew is what had happened on the day before our original wedding, 11 years ago. Daxton's mother, Persephone, had pulled me aside. She'd taken me into her sewing room. She'd closed the door. She'd said, "Honey, I need to tell you something. I'm not stupid. I know what you and Daxton are." I'd frozen. Persephone had taken my hand. She'd said, "I know you both. I've known for years. I'm not going to tell anyone, but I need you to know something. We're not doing this because we don't know what you are. We're doing this because we love you both and we want to give you a way to stay in this family without breaking it." I'd cried. She'd hugged me. She told me to never tell Daxton she'd known. She told me to take care of him. I'd never told Daxton. We've been divorced for 5 years now. Daxton's mother died last week. She'd been sick for 2 months. She'd called me from her hospital bed 3 days before she died. I hadn't spoken to her in 9 years. She'd said, "Sweetheart, I have something I need to give you. I've been keeping it for you. I'd hoped to give it to you in person, but I'm running out of time. There's an envelope in my safety deposit box. The bank has been instructed to release it to you upon my death. Open it before you tell Daxton anything." I drove home today. I picked up the envelope. It's sitting on my kitchen table. Maricela was sitting across from me. She'd made tea. She was just waiting, the way she always does when she knows I need time. I told her everything. The call from Persephone, the safety deposit box, and then I told her the thing I'd never told anyone, the sewing room, the 11-year secret. Maricela reached across the table and put her hands over mine. She said, "Then open it. You kept her promise. Now keep her last one." My hands were shaking when I picked up the envelope. I tore it open. Inside there were 3 things. The first was a handwritten letter, folded neatly in Persephone's handwriting. The second thing was another envelope, smaller, sealed tight, and on the front it said Daxton, just his name. The third thing was a bank receipt, a printout from a savings account. My name was on it. Daxton's name was on it. The balance showed $43,216. I just sat there staring at it. I said to Maricela, "I've never seen this before in my life." Maricela picked up the receipt. She said, "Read the letter." So I unfolded Persephone's letter. 6 pages of her handwriting, front and back. Persephone explained everything. She said that after Daxton and I had been disowned, she had started putting money aside every single month. She told Wade it was going to a church fund, a missions fund. She'd been doing it for 9 years. She wrote, "I couldn't stand up to your father or to Wade in public. I wasn't brave enough, but I could do this. I could make sure you two were never without a safety net, even if you never knew it existed. I'm sorry I wasn't louder. I'm sorry I let them think I agreed. I loved you both every single day." I couldn't see the paper anymore because I was crying so hard. Maricela held me. I said, "She was the only one. She was the only parent who ever really saw us." I kept reading. I got to the bottom of page 5, and there was a part that made me go cold. Persephone wrote, "I need to warn you about something. Wade found a draft of my letter to Daxton last month. He doesn't know about the money yet, but he knows I wrote to him. He's angry. He believes I was encouraging your sin behind his back. Be careful at the service. Wade may try to make this about himself. And your mother, Ophelia, has been in contact with Wade. They've been talking. I don't know what they're planning, but I know it isn't kind." The funeral was in 3 days, back in our hometown. I was going to have to face Wade. I was going to have to face Ophelia. I was going to have to face the whole community that had thrown us away. Persephone had told me to open mine before telling Daxton anything, but she hadn't told me to open Daxton's. His envelope was sealed. I put it down. I picked up my phone and called Daxton. He answered on the second ring. I could tell right away he'd been crying. He said, "I can't believe she's gone." I'd keep calling her phone just to hear her voicemail. My chest got so tight. I almost told him everything right there, but not over the phone. He needed to be able to hold that letter in his own hands. So instead I said, "I'm coming to the funeral. We'll go together. I need to talk to you about something when I see you, in person." He said, "You're scaring me." I said, "It's not bad. I promise. It's something your mom wanted you to have." We hung up. This quiet, gentle woman who everyone in that church thought was just a good pastor's wife who followed the rules had spent 9 years of her life secretly fighting for us. She'd loved us in the margins where nobody was watching. I flew to Portland 2 days before the funeral. Sebastian opened the door. He hugged me tight. Then he pulled back and kept his voice low and said, "He's in the bedroom. He hasn't eaten in 4 days. He keeps saying he never got to make things right with her. He thinks she died hating him." I felt felt sick because I was standing there with a letter that proved the exact opposite of what Daxton believed. I walked into the bedroom. Daxton was sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked up at me and just said, "Hey." I sat down next to him. We went to bed early because we had a long drive the next morning, about 14 hours from Portland to West Virginia. Daxton said he needed the time, so we left before sunrise. Sebastian drove. Daxton sat in the backseat with me. About 3 hours in, somewhere on a highway cutting through the middle of nowhere, I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I kept thinking about what Sebastian had said. He thinks she died hating him. I turned to him. I said, "I need to tell you something about your mom, about something that happened a long time ago that I promised her I would never tell you." I told him about the day before our wedding, about the sewing room, about Persephone closing the door and taking my hand, about her telling me she knew, that she'd always known, that she'd wanted to give us a way to stay in the family until we were strong enough to leave on our own. The car got really quiet. Daxton didn't say anything for a long time. Then, very quietly, he said, "She knew? Before the wedding? She knew and she still let us go through with it?" I said, "She did it to protect us. She knew if she said anything to anyone else we'd be outed before we were ready. She gave us time, Dax." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope with his name on it. I held it out to him. I said, "She wrote you a letter. This one is just for you." He took it from me. His hands were shaking. He ran his thumb over his name like he was touching her hand. Then he opened it. I watched him read. His eyes moved down the page. Then his chin started trembling. Then his shoulders started shaking. Then he just completely broke. He started sobbing so hard that Sebastian pulled the car over to the shoulder of the highway. Sebastian climbed into the backseat with us. Daxton was holding the letter against his chest and crying in a way I'd never seen him cry before. This was the cry of someone who just found out they'd been loved the whole time they thought they'd been forgotten. After a few minutes, he lifted the letter and read one part out loud. His voice was barely there, cracking on every word. He said, "You were never broken. You were never my shame. You were the best thing I ever made. I'm sorry your father couldn't see that. I'm sorry I couldn't say it when it mattered, but I'm saying it now. I love you exactly as you are." We sat on the shoulder of that highway for about 20 minutes. The whole world kept moving, but we just sat there. Finally, Daxton wiped his face. He folded the letter carefully. He took a deep breath. Then he said, "My father is going to be at this funeral. Your mother is going to be at this funeral. The whole church is going to be there. And they all think my mom agreed with them." I nodded. Daxton looked at me. His eyes were still wet, but there was something else in them now. Something hard. He said, "I want them to know she wasn't." I told him about the warning at the bottom of Persephone's letter to me, about Wade finding the draft, about Wade and Ophelia talking. Daxton's jaw tightened. He said, "I don't care. She spent her whole life being quiet to protect us. I'm not going to be quiet to protect them." Sebastian said, "We need a plan. We can't just walk in there swinging." We got back on the road. We planned. We arrived in town late that night. We checked into a motel just outside of town. I called Marcella. She told me Genesis had called. Genesis was an old college friend who'd become a paralegal. After I'd found the bank receipt, I'd reached out to her to help me figure out what the savings account was. Genesis told me the account had been opened 12 years ago. Persephone had set it up so that if she died, the funds would transfer automatically into an account under just mine and Daxton's names. But there was a problem. Wade was listed as the executor of Persephone's estate. If he found out about the savings account before the automatic transfer was complete, he could potentially freeze it. Genesis said, "The transfer takes 5 business days from the date of death. She died 6 days ago. You have until tomorrow at close of business." I went to Daxton and Sebastian's room and told them. Daxton sat on the edge of the bed. Then he said, "So he can't find out about the money until tomorrow evening." I nodded. I said, "Which means at the funeral tomorrow, we can't mention the money, only the letters." The letters were enough. What mattered most was that everyone in that church was going to find out that the woman they thought stood silently beside them had actually been standing with us the whole time. The morning of the funeral, I put on a black dress. I went next door. Sebastian was helping Daxton with his tie. Daxton's hands were shaking too much to do it himself. Sebastian looked at him and said, "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." Daxton looked at him. Then he looked at me, standing in the doorway. He said, "I've been ready for 9 years. I just didn't know it." We drove to the church. The parking lot was full. I saw my father Marcellus's truck. My chest got tight. Daxton spotted Wade first. He was standing at the entrance of the church, shaking hands with people. Wade saw us coming. His face didn't change, just flat. When we got to the door, he said flatly, "You came." Daxton stopped in front of his father. He said, "She was my mother." Wade said, "She was my wife, and I'll decide how she's remembered today." Sebastian took a step forward, but Daxton put his hand on Sebastian's arm. Daxton said, "We're here to mourn her, nothing else." Wade turned his eyes to me. He said, "I know about the letter. I know she wrote to you. Whatever poison she put in there, you keep it to yourself today. This is her funeral, not your platform." I didn't say anything. I just held his stare for a second, and then I walked past him into the church. Inside, it smelled the same. Wood polish and old hymnals. I looked toward the front and saw her. Ophelia, my mother, 3rd row. She turned her head. Our eyes met. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then she looked away, fast, like looking at me burned. Marcellus was sitting right beside her. He didn't look up at all. We sat in the back row. As soon as we sat down, people started turning around, whispers moving through the rows like a wave. The service started. Wade walked to the front of the church and stood behind the podium. He talked about Persephone as a devoted wife, a godly woman, a woman of faith, a woman who stood by her family's values until the end. Every single word was a half-truth, which is almost worse, because Persephone had also been secretly saving money for her gay son and his gay best friend for 9 years. She had also been the only person in that entire building who had chosen love over rules. And Wade was up there turning her into a flat, obedient cardboard cutout. He was erasing her. Daxton leaned over and whispered, "He's rewriting her." I whispered back, "Not for long." One by one, church members stood up and walked to the front. Faithful, obedient, traditional. That was the version of Persephone they were building. Then Wade stepped back up to the microphone. He glanced toward the back row, right at us. He said, "I want to make something clear. My wife loved her family, her real family, the people who honored her values. Anyone who tries to twist her memory into something it wasn't, well, that says more about them than about her." The silence after his words hung in the air like smoke. And then Daxton stood up. Sebastian reached for his hand, grabbed it, held it tight. Daxton gently pulled his hand free. He stepped stepped out of the pew. He walked to the front of the church. The church went completely silent. Daxton looked out at the room. Then he spoke. My mother was the bravest person I've ever known, not because she stood up in front of everyone, but because she loved people, even when it cost her everything to stay quiet about it. Wade's voice cut through the air like a blade. Sit down, Daxton. Daxton didn't move. He said, my mother wrote me a letter before she died. She told me she'd known I was gay since I was 15. She told me she'd known my best friend was gay too. She told me she loved us both, every single day. She told me she was sorry she couldn't say it out loud. Gasps moved through the pews. Wade's face went red. He said, that's enough. You will not do this at her funeral. Daxton held up the letter. His hand was shaking, but his voice was steady. He said, this is her handwriting, Dad. You can check it. You probably already know because you found the draft. She wasn't on your side. She was on ours. She just couldn't tell you because she was afraid of exactly this. Wade reached for the microphone. Daxton stepped back, and that's when I stood up. I don't even remember deciding to do it. My body just moved. I walked all the way to the front, and I stood next to Daxton. I heard Ophelia's voice. Sit down. I didn't stop. I leaned into the microphone and I said, Persephone pulled me aside the day before our wedding. She looked me in the eye and told me she knew. She told me she wasn't going to out us. She told me she was doing this to give us a way to stay in this family until we were strong enough to leave. She told me to take care of her son, and I did. And she took care of both of us, every single day, in ways none of you knew about. I didn't mention the money. I didn't need to. Wade grabbed the microphone stand with both hands. He said, you are lying. My wife would never have supported this. Daxton pulled the letter out fully and held it up so the front row could see it. He said, anyone who knew my mother's handwriting can look at this right now. She signed it. She dated it. She wrote 6 pages to each of us. She told us she loved us. She told us she was sorry she couldn't be brave enough to say it to your face, Dad, but she said it to us, and that's enough. The church fell apart. Some people were crying. Some were whispering to each other. Then I heard a sound from the third row. Ophelia was crying. And it wasn't the kind of crying I expected. It wasn't angry. It was real. Broken. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and old. Marcellus put his arm around her. She pushed it off. Then she stood up. I braced myself. I thought this was it. This was the attack Persephone had warned me about. But Ophelia looked at me from across the room, tears running down her face, and she said, I read your posts. Every one of them. Every picture of your wedding. Every holiday with Marcella. I look at them every single night. The church went silent again. Ophelia's voice cracked. Persephone called me a month before she died. She told me I was going to lose you forever if I didn't change. She told me she was dying and her only regret was not being braver. She told me not to make the same mistake. She stopped. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And I still couldn't do it. I still couldn't pick up the phone because I was afraid of what everyone in this room would think of me. She lifted her hand and gestured at the pews around her. I chose all of you over my own daughter, and Persephone knew it, and she died knowing it, and I have to live with that. I couldn't move. Daxton reached over and took my hand. Ophelia sat back down, sobbing. Marcellus sat beside her, staring straight ahead, stone-faced. Wade stepped forward and said into the silence, this service is over. But nobody moved. Daxton leaned into the microphone one last time. His voice was soft now, gentle. He said, my mother spent her whole life being quiet so that other people could be comfortable. She asked me in her letter not to be quiet anymore, so I won't be. I love you, Mom, and I know you loved me. That's how she should be remembered. He set the microphone down. He took my hand. We turned and walked down the aisle together. Sebastian stepped into the aisle, and the 3 of us walked out of that church side by side. Nobody stopped us. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. Daxton made it about 3 steps into the parking lot before he collapsed against Sebastian and started crying harder than I'd ever seen him cry. I wrapped my arms around both of them. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Genesis. It said, transfer complete. Account is in your and Daxton's names. It's done. I turned the screen toward Daxton. He read it, then he laughed through his tears. This broken, beautiful sound. He said, she thought of everything. I looked back at the church doors. Then one of them opened. Ophelia stepped out alone. She stood on the top step, looking at me from 30 feet away. She didn't walk closer. I didn't walk closer either. We just looked at each other. She mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. I nodded once. I didn't say anything back. Not yet. I turned and walked to the car with Daxton and Sebastian. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the side mirror. Ophelia was still standing on the church steps, alone, watching us drive away. I reached into my bag and touched Persephone's letter. I whispered, thank you. Daxton, eyes still red, reached over from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. He said, she'd be proud of us. I nodded. She already was.